You asked for it. Here it is. It's a podcast from Apathetic Enthusiasm.
Coming to you live from a 5-month hiatus. Not sure what's been going on and why we've been gone for so long, but it's probably not pertinent, not even semi-pertinent, and I can tell you what, it's definitely not Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am Travis.
I'm so tired, and I'm Brandon. Wait, am I tired or am I Brandon? Make up your mind.
I think he's raring to go. Welcome to Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast, back from a several-month hiatus. Yes, we are back. We are back with some Rick and Morty news, some more talking points to discuss. Thank you. Odds are, if you're listening to this, you're probably a subscriber, and it's this podcast has found its way into your podcast feed, like a little surprise, nugget that you find in the bottom of the McDonald's bag when you only ordered like a 10-piece, and you pull the nuggets out, and then you look in the bag and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a podcast.
It's like when you go. I went to Jack in a Box the other day, and I ordered the curly fries, just a small curly fry. I don't need an entire thing of curly fries. I just need a little small thing of curly fries, and then there was an extra fry in there, and I'm like, I didn't want a whole thing of Jack in a Box fries, but I'll take this one. And that's us right now. Today on Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast, we are the podcast that you don't really want, but it's okay sometimes.
We're still here. We're still here for the diehards, and if you are a diehard fan or you are just joining us for the first time, if you want to follow along with us and anything that we happen to post online, there are a few ways you can do that. It's weird because we're going to read the same social media links, but the social media landscape has changed drastically. Since the last time we recorded a podcast. But anyway, over on Twitter, at Rick and Morty Pod, Zuckerberg still got it locked down over at Facebook, facebook.com/Rick and Morty Podcast. Instagram, Rick and Morty Podcast. You can send us emails, rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. If your subreddit or a subreddit is no longer on private, congratulations. But you can find us occasionally hanging out on the official Rick and Morty subreddit. That's rickandmorty.reddit.com, or our own subreddit, rickandmortypodcast.reddit.com. You can also go to our website, rickandmortypod.com. That's where you can find all of our past episodes, things like that. You can see what we look like and interact with the show if you head over to twitch.tv/apathetic enthusiasm. That is where we are live streaming. That's right. We do the show live, and you can be part of it. Head over to Twitch. If you miss it, if you're busy on Monday nights, you can still catch video versions of the podcast by going to youtube.com/apathetic enthusiasm. You can get videos of all of our podcasts over there. Finally, you can catch Brandon playing cool music, all of his cool, like, you can catch our Twitch only post show. You can catch recorded versions of that if you go to patreon.com/apathetic enthusiasm. That's where you can support our podcasts and really just support all of our endeavors, including sending us to Comic-Con this year. So big thanks to all the patrons over at patreon.com/apathetic enthusiasm. That's the business. That's all done. Brandon, how does it feel? Do you remember how to make this podcast?
Do I ever remember to make this podcast? No, I don't. I do know that this is more structured than our other show, Apathetic Enthusiasm.
A little bit, yeah.
And probably still more consistent than my Twilight Zone podcast. But yeah, I generally know how to do this. I'm pretty excited to be back. I mean, we're not going to be back full time yet, right? Because we still got some time to go, and I think we'll talk about all of that. But yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to have a little bit of structure, and because we actually have news this last week.
Yeah, it was weird putting the show notes together. You say 5-month hiatus, but it was still a little bit of a challenge putting all of these show notes together. So we're gonna cover a lot over the next 30 45 minutes. But what we like to cover first and foremost, if y'all remember, is a little segment called Semi-Pertinent News.
Scoo-doo-doo-doo-doo, it's semi-pertinent news. Scoo-doo-doo-doo-doo, it's semi-pertinent news. Coming to you in your ears right now. Semi-pertinent news coming to you in your ears right now. First up,
right in those ear
uh,
holes.
for those of you who are coming back, you know what this is about. This is about news that isn't directly necessarily related to the show. But well, I guess this is for people who've never listened to the show before. This is like semi-pertinent. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Our first things first. Happy Father's Day to Jerry and Rick. That's all. Oh, and I guess Morty,
and
Morty,
all the other dads, I guess.
yeah, but this is semi-pertinent, so
okay.
we have to keep it on their level, right?
Oh, okay. So only Jerry and Rick. Is that
and
all
Morty.
the dads in the show? Is that all the? Well,
and,
Morty's a dad.
Yeah.
Morty's a dad.
Yeah. And also happy Father's Day to you, belated.
Oh, thanks.
Of course. And yeah,
thank you. Yesterday.
Thank you for wishing me a happy Father's Day as well. Okay, next up, moving away from the Father's Day piece. Yeah, no, it's fine. No, you don't have to say it again, Travis.
I said it to you earlier.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
Fishing for Father's Day. Blessings.
No, I'm not. No, I said thank you. Okay,
Happy
next
Father's
up on
Day.
our. Okay, stop now. You're embarrassing me. Okay, next
all
up
right,
on some
actual pertinent news.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. So there's a movie that came out in theaters this year in 2023. It stars Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Hoult, and it is a movie about Dracula's servant Renfield, appropriately titled Renfield. Now, why is this semi-pertinent news? Well, because I just watched it streaming live, and I remembered this earlier in the year, and I forgot about it until I watched the credits last night of Renfield. That's right, Ryan Ridley, our Rick and Morty alumni, wrote
friend of the podcast, Ryan Ridley.
That's right. So he wrote that movie. It's a pretty good movie. It was silly. There was action. There was gore. There was comedy. I enjoyed it. I recommend.
Now he was he executive producer, writer? What was his official title?
He was the writer.
Okay.
Old the guy who did Walking Dead.
Guy who did Walking Dead.
The guy who did Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman,
Yeah.
he executive produced it.
Okay.
And it was a story idea by him, but Ridley actually wrote it. So
okay. Speaking of writers, obviously we've been talking about this over on our other podcast, but there is a writer strike going on right now. Will this affect Rick and Morty? Probably not in the short term. We'll actually talk a little bit more about this in the main thing. But yeah, shout out to all the writers. We've talked to a lot of writers over the course of making this podcast. We just want to take a minute to voice our support, and hopefully they can come to a positive resolution quickly. Yeah. So anyway, writer strike. That's happening. Sorry.
Writer strike. Sorry. So the Robert Kirkman, as I mentioned, executive produced it. He is the guy in charge of Skybound Comics, which leads us to an appropriate segue. Rick and Morty #9 was announced. The title, I don't know what the title was, but the comic, Rick and Morty #9, written by Alex Fearer, friend of the podcast, and Fred Stressing, friend of the podcast. That's out in September, which was announced. We talked to them before. They said they were doing the comics. Also, Gina Allnat did some variant covers for it, so shout out. And yeah,
this is the sort of reboot restructure, because they got to 100, right, and then they started over with Rick and Morty #1 again, correct?
Yeah. That sounds right. It's been a while since we've talked about Rick and Morty anything, so
yeah.
I think that's accurate.
8 Rick and Morty comics have come out since we last talked about it, so it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
pretty wild.
So semi-pertinent, those other 8 that you need to pick up.
Moving over into the video game department, we did get some news just out in the last week that High on Life, the game from Squanch Games, is coming out with a new DLC. This is called High on Knife, and it is a darker, edgier, almost almost like horror themed version of High on Life. Many of the same characters are there. One notable exception is the gun that was voiced by Justin Roiland is not in this. There is the Squanch Games cut ties with Roiland around the same time that Adult Swim did. So, this is going to be an extension, some sort of expansion on it. I guess Knifey gets a few extra abilities or something like that. There's also a hyper-violent upgrade to Knifey, 2 new guns, Harper, who's an ex-military pistol, trying to overcome her past, and then and then a pinball gun, which is a chaotic little gibberish weirdo gun. But anyway, no date, no price tag associated with it, but we did get a trailer. So if you weren't watching the video, you can head out to YouTube, look up High on Life, and catch the trailer for High on Knife.
High on Knife, voiced by Michael Cusack, still, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, you go and if you liked High on Life, you'll probably like High on Knife whenever that comes out. Yeah, check it out. It's no Diablo 4, but what is? Except Diablo 3 and Diablo 2 and the first.
And I haven't even gotten to Diablo because I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom.
But you can check that out on our other podcast, Apathetic Enthusiasm.
For all your game talk, go to the other pod. Yeah.
But so kind of on that note, going into semi-pertinent news for this podcast, for that podcast, something we announced over there, but this is the first Rick and Morty podcast we've done in months, as we said, 5 months. Well, it's important that we point out that this episode is where we announced that we're going to Comic-Con this year. We got woo, San Diego Comic-Con. Woo, we got press passes. We're going to get invited to all the big shindigs. We'll meet.
No, some of that's true. We did get press passes. We are going to San Diego Comic-Con.
Meet all the big stars.
If we got into one shindig, I would be shocked. Flabbergasted.
I think Jimmy J is going to be down there.
Okay.
And so
we've got
we have an into the in parties. He's going to love to see you, by the way. Jimmy J, by the way, everybody, Jimmy J is a great guy. I'm not buttering him up. He doesn't listen to the show. Jimmy J's cool. Okay. Anyway, so we're excited to do that. Travis told me if we're going to go to a comic convention together, I have to be on a schedule and we have to actually.
We are making content. We will be recording at least one podcast while we are in the same state. It's like a requirement. Except for the last time we were in the same state. Well, we did technically record something, but it was only like 5 minutes, and then you pushed it out as just like bonus nonsense.
Yeah.
But yes, we will definitely be recording a podcast. We are going to be getting interviews with anybody that will talk to us. So we'll be putting together some videos, some audio stuff. Make sure that you're following on any of those socials that we listed before. Because it may not all get posted to Interdimensional RSS. Some of it will probably be on the Apathetic Enthusiasm side of things, especially because many of the things that we talk about on that podcast cover the spectrum of nerd culture. So, make sure you're following over there if you want to get all of our Comic-Con coverage. But we're very excited for late July to start making that stuff happen. And producer's note, we need to have a few meetings about how we're actually going to make that happen, Brandon. But that's for another time. And yeah, we have one last thing that we have to cover.
That's right.
And thankfully, it's almost like he did it on purpose. We have something for the last micro segment.
Yes, we do. You love it. I love it. We all love it. Travis hates introducing it. It's the Dan Harmon Social Media Minute.
This is the part where I'm supposed to sing. Boop, 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 boop. Dan Harmon social media minute.
It's
Okay.
sucked. I hate you.
Ooh, man, are we rusty? Anyway, that's right. Dan Harmon, he has been a ghost on social media
Hiatus.
pretty much since all of the Royland news dropped. Was only ever really active on Instagram to begin with, but his Instagram hadn't seen a new post since early January until about 2 days ago, when Dan Harmon took to Instagram to give that signal boost to the powers that be that vote for, TV awards, whether those are Emmys or anything else, for a little show that we've actually talked about in the past called Jury Duty. Jury Duty is a show that was out on Freevee. It kind of gained popularity for the platform, and this is a show that basically pits one guy in a scenario where he's on jury duty and he thinks he's on a documentary series with a bunch of other jurors. Turns out everybody else that he interacts with is an actor. Think sort of what was that show?
Joe Schmo Show.
Oh yeah, Joe Schmo Show, exactly. But all of this is being on Dan's Instagram because his fiance, I'm assuming still fiance, we don't know. It's been since January since he gave us an update. But Cody Heller, his fiance, was actually one of the writers that helped put this show together. This is something she was doing, mid-pandemic, where they were trying to figure out a way to write an unscripted show where anything could potentially happen when one of the people doesn't know that they're on television. It really is a really fascinating show. It is really good, and it is being presented for your consideration for Outstanding Comedy Series. So if anybody, in the very, very rare case where you are a voting person for like the Emmys,
who are listening to this or watching
check
this,
out Jury Duty.
Please do.
It's a good show. Congrats to Cody. Hopefully,
showrunner
it does well.
Not just the writer, but she was the showrunner for him. So
I need to go back and watch the very last episode where they do all the behind the scenes stuff and see if I can notice Cody, because I wasn't paying close enough attention to think about it. But yeah,
it didn't click.
Go back.
It didn't click. Well, that is it, I think. Oh, I guess I know we said that's the last thing. Very, very last thing is well, I was gonna say something about the Reddit stuff, but I don't know why. We already kind of talked about it. Just
we'll hold off. Reddit's a mess. Check out AE podcast if you want to know more.
Well, that's why we don't have a Reddit post of the week, is because the Rick and Morty subreddit went dark for 48 hours. I tried to convince him, hey, Rick would have wanted you to go dark indefinitely because fuck capitalism, right? Turn all those ones to zeros, but I got out.
They didn't have it.
Actually, they're like, you're not really a mod here.
You just have the privileges so you can post rewatches and live chats. Anyway, that's it for semi-pertinent news. Whether we are producing regular episodes or not, if you see any sort of Rick and Morty related content that you feel we should cover on this show, please feel free to send it to us at any of the platforms we talked about before. Thanks to everybody that still does that, and we appreciate all of your help in keeping us aware of some of the things that are going on loosely around the world of Rick and Morty. But for now, we are going to move over into a little segment we like to call The Main Thing.
The main thing. It's Rick and Morty, the main thing. Baby. It's
baby. Welcome to The Main Thing, everybody. So glad that you're here, celebrating an astonishingly full decade of Rick and Morty. That's right, 10 years. We're 10% of the way there, Brandon. 100 years, Rick and Morty. We're 10th of the way there. Can you
It
believe
feels like yesterday when I said, you know what? 9 years from now, we're still going to be talking about this show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird because I didn't start watching the show until season 2 was already out
It's
on video.
it's also
So-
weird because I was the same boat. basically.
So, yeah. Oh.
So let's talk about that. So 10 years of Rick and Morty, which is crazy. Came out in 2013, and here we are 10 years later. And it's still part of our lives. It's still
Yeah.
part of Travis's my lives. It's still part of yours if you're listening to this, if you're interested. And it's gone through hiatus after hiatus and long breaks. Some drama and controversy, which obviously that was this last year so far. But we wanted to just talk about some of the things that came out of the 10 years of Rick and Morty, which we finally got our bit of news out of the Annecy Animation Festival out France or Paris.
Yeah,
Paris,
it is.
France.
It's a French animation festival. Started to get some hints that this might be a thing. On Spencer Grammer's Instagram, I think is where I first saw something because she was posting about getting ready for a Rick and Morty panel, and I was like, Comic-Con's a month away. What other events are happening? Where is Spencer doing a panel?
Well,
And, yeah,
so I hate to interrupt you, Travis.
no,
but
it is what you're best at.
But I have to stop you because the first we heard about this was even before Spencer Grammer. It was because I'm in the subreddit. I'm a moderator in a subreddit, and every once in a while I go in to see what is being moderated upon. Like, oh, somebody put some gay porn again, where some like, hey, check out Rick, and it's like some dude sucking another dude's dick, right? And it's like,
But is it at least Rick and Morty themed?
no,
Oh,
no,
well,
not
come
at
on,
all,
guys.
not at all. And
Come
and
on.
his dank is just so big. I'm like, why is it? Why is that? How is that enjoyable? I don't get it. But along those lines, there was somebody who's we have the auto mod. So because when people like post links and stuff like that, the auto mod, the automated moderation captures it and says, no, go ahead and review this manually. Well, so the Automod caught this for the Annecy Animation Festival that was out of France, and I was like, oh, okay, let me go ahead and pull the thread on this story, and then it turned out like, oh, there's this premiere article. They're gonna be doing this interview and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This whole
Yeah.
thing. It's like, oh shit, like. And I will say that Travis and I we want to do a new episode of Rick and Morty, and as soon as we do, some new bit of news comes out
Yeah, like the day after we produce the show.
every fucking time. and I guarantee tomorrow when we release this, Rick and Morty information will come out.
Get ready for the season 7 release date because they are gonna announce it this week, I'm sure.
140%, 42%. Okay, so this news comes out and we're like, okay, now we actually have content. Content's back on the menu, boys, and here we go. We actually have.
Yeah. So most of this information, most of this discussion, doesn't come from the panel itself because, try as I might, I really didn't find any coverage of the panel itself, and I don't know if that's just me, bad Googling, but thankfully there was a great interview from this a French magazine, Premiere magazine. That was the website was in French, and thanks to Google, we were able to translate it. But yeah, the panel itself was with the president of Adult Swim, Michael Owellen.
Oweleen, Ouwelleen.
Michael
We're
O.
sorry. You this early watch of episodes, so we're sorry, Michael.
Steve Levy,
Mm-hmm.
and Spencer Grammer. Those are the three that were on the panel. Spencer did not participate in the interview with Premiere Magazine, but there were some really great talking points from that article. We should be able to link it in the show notes. Yeah, the first thing that they talked about was 10 years of Rick and Morty and how wild that is, and asking both the president of Adult Swim and producer why has the show been so popular? Why has sci-fi kind of stuck out with the audience? And I think for us, we recognize that the show is more than just sci-fi. The show is more than just, dick and fart jokes. It is a combination of the characters, the writing, the acting, and then all kind of wrapped in this high sci-fi adventure type wrapper that kind of ties everything together. And anyway, that's what I think. I don't know, how do you feel about 10 years of Rick and Morty? Is there anything that you feel kind of stands out after following this show for nearly a decade?
Well, as we go into all the seasons, you start. I tell you what, our top 10 gets harder to pick out over the and I think it's kind of like anything. Looking at South Park over a 10-year span, looking at The Simpsons over a 10-year span, Futurama's coming back for a new season. Looking at those episodes and just seeing how the quality, how the writing changes, how the stories change, it goes through ebbs and flows. And so, although I liked stuff out of season 5, I think season 6 was a much better season overall. And I'm interested to see how 10 years. It's weird. We're talking about 10 years, but there's only 6 seasons. It's going to be interesting to me how season 7, season 8, season 9, so on and so forth.
Well, and it is definitely a transitional period of the show with things changing, and that is one thing that gets discussed, and we can kind of jump ahead to this and then maybe backtrack. But obviously, the news about Justin Roiland comes up in the interview. They both talk about how they were shocked by it and disheartened, and we're excited about how the team, and we're talking about the entire team at Rick and Morty, was able to push forward and do what they say is some of the best work they've done so far in terms of the animation, the writing. The entire staff and crew has really leaned into these seasons, and it really just comes down to how are they going to voice the two main characters moving forward, and a little bit of that comes out in the interview itself.
Yeah, and so talking about, we don't want this to turn it. Travis and I, we talked about this before we did the podcast. We don't want this to be about Roiland. No. But obviously that he's a part of this. He's part of the discussion. And so the biggest question a lot of fans had, a lot of the Redditors, a lot of discussion posts had was, okay, well, he was acquitted, or the case was dismissed. So, well, he should be back now, right? Why are you going to get rid of him? So he's not coming back. That's the news that came out of this article, was he's not coming back. They are recasting his voice. They're redubbing his voice. It wasn't clear to me if they were redubbing like all of the voices throughout all of the seasons, or if they're just moving forward, they're redubbing his voices.
I think that's excessive to go back and redo 6 seasons of content. I personally, it's a choice they can make. It's their money. That's fine. In terms of redubbing, I don't know if that was a Google translation error, or if it's just more speaking to anything that had already been recorded
moving forward
for season 7, things like that. Because we know that they work on this show well in advance of when it actually comes out. So there's a high possibility that they had scenes, if not full episodes, that were already recorded with Roiland, that they are going back and starting with a new voice actor moving forward with the future seasons. So I don't know that they'd go back and do the whole thing. I doubt they would, because that suddenly makes my like Blu-ray copies like way more valuable because they have the old voices or something. But
yeah. You and 500,000 other people.
yeah, no, but you just it's about the long game, right? Because they scoff at the VHS collectors in the 80s and 90s, but look at them now.
I bought 500 copies of the season 5 Blu-ray. Yeah, so they also talk about in the replacement discussion, they talk about they're not looking for imitators, they're casting through traditional means, which is important for like some of the folks who have amazing voices. Like saw the Vanity Fair videos. There's Sean Kelly, I think is his name. Like his does his voice. He's very, very good also, as well as imitating the voice. But I think Michael, the president of Adult Swim, came out, and this is his quote, but it's looking good. It's a rather unique situation. I'll take an example. There have been several great Bugs Bunny voice actors, and I love what Jeff Bennett has done with them, but it's not Mel Blanc. And yet we recognize the character. I even think that for Rick and Morty, we will do even better. It will be fine. It'll be great.
For me, that quote really shifted my perspective about the thought of recasting the voice actor to play Rick and Morty, right? Because, yeah, Disney celebrating 100 years as a company. Mickey Mouse originally voiced by Walt Disney. Walt Disney eventually stopped doing that. Mickey has been voiced by many talented people throughout, 100 years pretty much of that character. And it's Mickey. Like even the new Mickey Mouse cartoons, different animation style, different tone, but like that's Mickey. And in this example, Bugs Bunny, it's the same way. Kermit the Frog is another great example. And there's times like when you hear Kermit the Frog, you're like, that's not Jim Henson.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back and you relax a little bit, you're like, okay, but that's Kermit. Like they are doing Kermit.
Right.
And I think that is what we as an audience need to expect from Rick and Morty moving forward. Is it going to be a completely different voice? No, that wouldn't make sense for the show or anything like that. Is it going to be Justin Roiland's voice? It's definitely not. So it's going to be some version of Rick and Morty that's going to be those characters, just portrayed by a different actor.
Yeah, you talk about Kermit. Kermit's a perfect example of that because like the Muppet movie that came out versus the original Muppet movie, like the Rainbow Connection. I was on a run the other day, and the original Rainbow Connection came up, and then I was like, I wonder what let me compare it to the new one. So as I'm running, I'm like, let me put on the new Rainbow Connection. And like, yeah, like that's one is clearly Henson, one is clearly not, but it's still distinctly Kermit. And so it's a prime example, like I said. So I think what they're gonna do with Rick, with Morty, with some of the other characters, I think it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna sound good. The voices are only part of it because Roiland didn't write things. He wasn't the writer.
He wasn't creatively engaged with the show for seasons.
Exactly. You give a good voice actor a good script, and they will make a good scene out of whatever they do. And that's what he did. He took a good script and then he made his voice and put it in there. So anyway, I'm interested to see who they come up with. I'm sure it'll be great. It'll be fine.
That first season 7 trailer is going to be wild, where there's going to be so much buzz around that trailer because odds are that is going to be the first time we hear the new voices for Rick and Morty. Or they get really artsy and there's no dialogue whatsoever, and then they make us wait until September, October, whenever the show comes out. Anyway, moving back to this interview, there are a few other things that got discussed that I felt were interesting. One of the questions was about the idea of red threads or that connective tissue between episodes or across seasons that The interviewer in this case said that the show kind of lacked a lot of those red threads. Obviously, you have like the evil Morty stuff. Now we have Rick Prime, some other canonical events that take place. But I really liked this quote from Steve Levy that said that there's a rule that they have where at least one episode each season. That's definitely my dog, by the way. Just so
we have like, instead of dueling banjos, we have dueling dogs right now. Because every once in a while, my dog's barking. Now it's your dog barking.
Despite my best efforts to like lock myself in a closet, aka podcast studio, and like shove like blankets under the like I'm running out of air in here.
Yeah.
But a dog bark, you just can't help it. Anyway.
Okay, sorry.
Back to what Steve was saying. Basically, there's a rule that they have to do at least one episode each season invoking that big story, right? My question for you, Brandon, is do you feel like that's enough? Do you feel like 1 out of 10 is the right number? I feel like they could probably get away with 2, and it still wouldn't feel like everybody is expecting it every episode. I like single one-off adventures, but do you think 1 is the right number, or do you think that that's going to be a little bit too much for the character or for the fans?
I think I think that quote is not about. I think it's just like expectation management, right? I think it's saying, look, we're gonna have at least one episode with the big story, and if you get more, fantastic. But if there's only one, then we told you back at the Annecy Film Animation Festival that at least one. Yeah. So I mean, it's saving them having that guarantee that, well, you guys said there was going to be at least 3, and so now they're like, oh, maybe the next episode's gonna. They said 3, so at least 3. The first 5 episodes weren't big stories, so that means right.
That means 3 of the next 5 have to be. So
yeah. It gets after that kind of conspiracy content creation, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, I think based off of what Scott Marder, the executive producer, had said before, that I think they want to do more lore-based stuff. And so I think that one episode each season is actually, it's going to be more than that, because they're not as afraid to take on some of those storylines.
And it may be the case because in season 6 we kind of see this, where in the premiere, that's where we're reintroduced to the idea of Rick Prime. He really becomes the new big bad for the show, where everybody getting sent back to their original realities. It really kind of reignites Rick's pursuit for this Rick Prime, the person that killed his family. And then you really don't see anything about it throughout the course of the season until the finale, where we discover that Rick's been hiding and has a robot that's interacting with the family so that he can pursue his hunt for this Rick Prime character. I don't know that either of those necessarily qualify, maybe more so the finale than the premiere, as that one episode that connects the red threads, right? You could almost get away with having some continuity sprinkled throughout other episodes, and then just have that one core episode where it's like, this is the episode where we're really getting into the meat of that story.
I think the only problem I have, maybe it's the only problem I can think of right now of lore dumping in a single episode, is it feels very forced.
Absolutely.
So sprinkling lore throughout a 10 episode spread of a season is more digestible to me than being like nothing, unrelated. All right, here's the history of the science behind Rick's spaceship and his backstory and the development of the spaceship, and how it turns out that he actually got the idea from Gearhead, right?
Yeah.
we don't. That's when it becomes like, all right, okay, like ham-fisted, so to speak. And I felt like that was some of my issue with like, I love the Bird Person episode where he goes the spotless mortar, whatever, eternal rickshine of the spotless mort.
Yep.
Where it seemed like I like that episode, but it was also like, here you go, fans, here's a bunch of lore, take it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll figure it out, and they've had lots of time to work on it. So, because they're several seasons ahead. This is another quote, and a little bit was talked about in regards to the writer strike, but the fact that season 8 is already fully written. They had already completed season 8 prior to the writer strike, and they managed to plot a good part of season 9 before the writer strike happened. So they're already starting to talk about season 10, which is wild. It's crazy that they're still like forecasting that far in advance. But yeah, so we've seen 6 seasons. 7 is on its way. 8 is fully written. So there's odds are no delay in either of those 2 seasons. But the hint that I get, and this is one of the things that the Adult Swim president talked about, was they're trying to stay consistent with the release. So they didn't give an actual release date, but they're trying to follow the pattern now, which sounds like we're going to get 1 season a year. It's going to happen later in the year, late summer into fall, probably like fall into winter time frame. And that's when we're going to get our new seasons of Rick and Morty, but they should stay consistent through those periods. So yeah.
Then, I think part of that too is we're talking about writer strike stuff. So there's an artist that I know that I follow, and he posted recently, like, looking for a job, and he was like saying, because he works on Rick and Morty, it's like, I work on Rick and Morty, but there's a writer strike, which is probably going to delay some things, which means I need to find another job. But it also means that the hiatuses will become more predictable, because, well, now like there's time to be like, here's this. So that's also interesting, that like there's a little bit more predictability, and we talked about this for ever since they came out with the 7-season deal, that there will be a little bit more predictability as far as like when we're expecting new episodes.
Yeah. And the last point, and this is what they finished the interview on, is talking about like, what's the limit? When will the show end? And based on the people in the interview, there is no limit. There's no cap on future seasons. The show could go on infinitely and forever, depending on, so long as they have new stories to tell or things to, much in the same way that The Simpsons has been on pretty much our entire lifetimes. The show has the potential for that kind of longevity, should they choose to go in that direction, or should the show continue being as popular as it is probably the better reason.
And we've talked about this. I've talked about this on the show before. I'm of 2 minds of things where, as long as they do have good episodes coming out, cool, like, great, we'll enjoy it, we'll have fun with it. Simpsons, talked about Simpsons being like, came out 89. It's the last 2 seasons have been really, really good, but there was a series of about 10 to 12 seasons, 15, 18, 20 seasons where they weren't that good. And like, that's the thing. Those are not tied together serially. Like, they go back and forth. They're like, Marge and Homer got married in the 70s. No, they got married in the 80s. Oh, they got married in the 90s. Oh, they got married in the 2000s, right? they're okay with changing things around. They have that benefit, and they can continually tell new stories about those characters because the times are always changing. The commentary, the satire is always changing. They can do things. But then I think of shows like The Walking Dead, where Gale Ann Hurd, Robert Kirkman, they're like, yeah, this show can go on forever. It can go on as long as we want it to. And taking that mentality and taking that type of storytelling, we saw by like season 5 of The Walking Dead that it was like, okay, here we go again. Here's a new city where they oh, there's a danger. Oh, we got to move. Well, let's set up a new settlement. Then by the end of the next season, oh, we got to move to a new settlement. Oh, we found a new settlement. Over and over and over again. Where now they have like a bunch of different spin-offs. There's a new Walking Dead spin-off coming out, Dead City, with Negan and Maggie. And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
The real Walking Dead is this show. Just cut it off. It's not good anymore. I don't want Rick and Morty to get to that point where
I agree with you.
Stop.
Yeah. And I think I don't feel like Dan would want I don't think Dan would be a part of the show if it got to that point. Like, I feel like he wants the show to be interesting, compelling, and, tell interesting stories and show the progression that it has with these characters and things like that. And I think if the show's not doing that, he's not going to be as engaged with it, which doesn't necessarily mean that the show's going to stop if he's not involved, but we'll just point at Community for a minute. But obviously that would have a significant effect. So we'll see. As of right now, we know they're already looking towards 10 seasons. We'll see where it goes from there. Anyway, if you want to catch this whole article, make sure to look it up. Make sure that you either speak French or you can translate using your browser of choice. And thanks to everybody that shared with us any information about this interview or the events taking place over in France. And hopefully next month, there will be a few more tidbits of information coming out. I don't know, maybe in a little Southern California town during a particular convention. Who knows?
And
Fingers
maybe
crossed.
And maybe tomorrow after this episode is released, who knows? We don't know for sure.
No. It'll be before you even finish editing and releasing it. The news will have come out.
And by that point in time, we're too lazy to add any addendums. We're like, fuck it, we'll just address it next time.
It's out. We'll talk about it next week.
I do want to. So there were a couple questions in the Twitch chat. So if you are listening to this on your podcast app of choice, know that we also record this live whenever we do a Rick and Morty podcast. So a couple questions about the discussion there in the Twitch chat. So the first one by old Peace Among Ricks, they write, what if they decide the voices are just going to be AI generated? Travis?
This gets to a whole different issue with some of the things that are being picketed right now. I don't see in 2023 that being a viable option. AI is developing very quickly. It is happening very fast, and there seem to be new advancements every time you turn around. But in terms of having a voice that's really like brings life to the characters, there's still a little bit of that uncanny valley in AI generated voices, which can be very convincing, but there's still there's some stutters and some pacing things that don't always get the point across. I don't know how you would train an AI to belch in the middle of words or do some of the stuttering. And I feel like the only source material that you would have to train the AI on right now would be all of Royland's previous work, which I think defeats the purpose anyway. So, yes, AI is a future consideration for everything, but I doubt that's the direction they'll go in the short term.
Yeah. So like the writer strike, they have some AI concerns from a voice actor perspective as well, voice actor concerns. So uh, you saw in like Rogue One, Grand Moff Tarkin, Peter Cushing, um, some other movies with some Uncanny Valley stuff. The thing is like those those images, those voices, they have to be those are your likeness.
Yeah.
And so in order to I did this on a voice AI thing where I trained it on my voice and wrote a script and then said, "Okay, AI, now say this like I would say this." And it was pretty close, right? But it also has this little disclaimer that says, "Is this your voice? Are you licensing your voice for this? If this is not your voice, you cannot do it." And so talked to my brother-in-law who does a little bit of like post-production stuff. Um, Also, Richard Horvitz, he does Invader Zim. He's done a bunch of different voices. Like this is all a concern on their side,
Yeah.
but they can't on the animation side. They can't use their voices unless they sign off on it.
Yeah.
But I've heard that like on the video game side, it's not as set in stone yet. But that's another discussion. Anyways,
For another podcast.
Yeah.
one more question from the Twitch chat from Invited Expert with some numbers there. Do you think they think that the show will take a ratings dip without Royland? What do you think?
What do I think? I think it's like The Flash, um, in the sense that Ezra Miller is a demonstrative piece of shit, and although I really want to see The Flash, I'm like, I can't. I have a hard time supporting that movie because he's in it. He hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been
Convicted. Yeah.
convicted, but we know that he's a piece of garbage. However, the general moviegoer audience doesn't know that.
Yeah.
They don't know that. They're not tracking that. They're not tracking stuff with James Gunn in the DCU. They're not fanboys are.
Yeah. We are.
We are, but generally people aren't, right? And so I think for the most part, people they don't know. They won't know that there's anything going on with Royland. They might not even notice that the voice is different. I hear imitations of Rick and Morty's voice, and people are like, "That is spot on," and I'm like, "That is not spot on." I can hear
that is barely close.
that is not it. And so I think there will be people that know. I think there will be people that don't know. But for the most part, I don't think they're going to care. And if there's a dip, it's going to be a very small subset of people. And maybe even I'll even put this out there. If they do make a big deal out of it, I think people will be more interested in seeing it and listening to it, so they can be like, "Oh, that is good," or "That's bad."
Yeah.
They want they there at least there won't be a dip immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the viewers that come back to be like, "Oh, what does it sound like now?" If the stories are compelling, if they can put out a few episodes, maybe another Rick Prime, you know, Red Thread type episode, and then a really great one-off adventure, that could be enough to actually regain some fans that have maybe drifted away after the last few seasons. So anything can happen. I don't think a lack of Royland will, in and of itself, create a ratings dip.
Yeah,
because I think the casual fan is either not even tracking what's going on, or just doesn't care enough to have a political stand on the show. So
yeah.
anyway, that is our questions. The last question, is that a Zelda shirt, Travis? Yes, it is, and we look forward to talking all about it in our post show, our Twitch and Patreon only post show which we'll do here in a little bit. Do you have any other listener suggestions or short outs that you wanna knock out before we get out of here, Brandon?
Yes, I do. I have a few listener suggestions and suggestions and short outs. So want to shout out obviously to all the folks in Twitch, Invited Expert, Apathetic Enthusiasm,
That's
Barnyard
nice.
Cruise, Peace Among Ricks. But I also want to shout out to folks who, it's been a five-month hiatus, but folks still interact with us from time to time. So I want to shout out J1, our longtime friend J1, Peace Among Ricks, which chat with you. Of course, Scary Terry Folds, the man, the myth. He is the legend.
Scary Terry, if you're coming out to San Diego, you gotta hit us up.
You gotta hit us up. He talking about the Annecy Animation Festival. He was shooting us notes about that as well. We had the conversations with him in the chat, and shooting him links as well. So I just want to say shout out to those of you out there who have stuck with us for this long. We appreciate you, and we look forward to talking about Rick and Morty as we continue on in this path to season 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 150.
100 years.
As long as it's
RSS. www.rickandmortypod.com/100 years. we should hide that URL. We should do that. We should put something on that URL.
Oh, we should.
Anyway, you heard it here. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for subscribing. All of the things. If you are new here, like, subscribe, leave a review, do all those things, and we will be back whenever there's more news. We'll definitely have some sort of episode in July when we are wrapping up all of our Comic-Con stuff. But until then, I'm Travis.
And I'm Brandon. And we both thank you for everything.
Thank you for everything.
Everything. Even this theme music. Coming to you not live as we end this episode.
I missed this song.